So that's the end of summer. That means the growing season's over, but it doesn't mean we have to stop enjoying eating our delicious organic homegrown veg. The key is to be able to preserve it, freeze it, or store it for the months ahead. Today we're going to look at 3 ways that we use to store our crops through the winter. So first up are pumpkins and squashes. Here you can see we've got butternut squashes. We've had a really good harvest this year, but we're now at the point where the stalks are starting to dry out, so it's time to harvest them. Storing squashes and pumpkins is really easy indoors. First of all, I need to pick them. So you can tell when these are ready to pick because the stem right next to the fruit starts to get really wooden and hard, and it sort of changes colour and gets a bit browner. And that's when you know, right, it's as ripe as it's going to get. Once that's happened, you can then harvest your crop, and the key is to leave a little bit of the stem on the fruit itself, because otherwise you can create damage, and that allows sort of rotting to happen and for the fruit to spoil later on in the winter. In order to preserve it long term, it's important to leave a little stub of the stem connected to the fruit. So there are a few which are sort of semi-grown. They're still quite green. They're not ripe yet, and so I'm just going to leave those and put them on the compost patch. There's really no point in keeping them. We've got plenty of ripe ones, but also they're just not ready. They're not close enough to being ripe for them to be worthwhile saving. Okay, that is an incredible harvest. Never expected it to be quite this many. Butternut squash is amazing. It's really easy to grow. Basically, once you've got it going, it just needs lots of space, it needs lots of sunlight, and then it needs to be grown in beds that have got tons of nutrients. That really is the key. Squashes, pumpkins, courgettes, they just love having lots and lots of food in the beds. So for us, we actually made these beds last year out of mushroom compost, which has got tons of nitrogen and phosphorus and all sorts of stuff in it. So really, really good for growing veg. Whether next year is quite so good, I don't know, but this was only 3 plants, so quite amazing. So first of all, I'm just going to clean them off, give them a wipe down and make sure that they're dry. Then I'm going to put them in the sunshine on a windowsill indoors. And that basically means that they'll continue to ripen and just make sure that they're absolutely ready for eating. Then after maybe a week or so of that, turning them all the time to make sure that they sort of get an even amount of sunshine all around, they'll be sort of dried out, the stalks will be completely dried out, the fruit will be ripe, and then basically it's a case of storing them out of direct sunlight. They need to be in the dry, but anywhere indoors on a shelf is absolutely fine, and they should last months and months and take through the winter. Fantastic. Okay, so next up is alliums, onions and garlic. Really easy to grow. We use sets. You can grow them from seeds, but we use sets, or with the garlic we just break up a clove that we grew the year before. When it gets to the point where the stalks of the onions start to fall over, once half of your whole crop have fallen over, you bend over all the rest, and then 10 days, 2 weeks later, they're ready to pull. You pull them out of the ground, lie them on the bed, and maybe leave them for a day or two as long as it's dry, just to properly dry out and to get rid of the soil that's on them and things like that. Then what you do is you create strings in a shed or some sort of covered space indoors with the bulb and the stalk. You bend them over the strings, you can alternate them back and forward so you can get quite a few onto your strings, and you leave it for maybe 4 weeks or so. Basically you're leaving it until the stalk is completely dried out and becomes sort of malleable, a bit like string. Okay, so step 1 is to prepare the onions and get them ready for stringing. That's very, very simple. All we have to do is First of all, we have to cut off the roots, which are now completely dried out, as you can see. So we just snip the roots off, and then what we want is we want to keep a bit of stalk that's about a hand's length. So basically you just hold it in your hand and then snip at the top. That is what we're going to use to create the string. So basically what we need to do is we need to go through each of these and get them ready for stringing. Okay, so once we've got our onions prepared, next we have to get our string organised that we're going to be tying these onions to and wrapping them around. So what we need to do is we need to get a sort of 4 foot length of, well, ideally I'm using polypropylene string here, which is very strong. You can use normal string, but it has to be pretty thick because these onion sets can get really heavy. So I have a sort of 4 foot length, I fold it in half, and then I'm going to tie the tops together, a simple knot, so that we end up with a sort of 2 foot length loop. I'm then going to hang that on a nail, and I put the knot at the top and I'm going to hang it beneath the nail. First thing I need to do is I need to create a little loop. So if I create a little loop in the strings, you can see that little tiny loop there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my largest onions and put the stalk through right down to snug against the bulb. I'm then going to pull that down gradually and bend the stalk over so that it locks, and that forms the base of my string. Now the technique for the rest of it is really pretty easy. Each time we take the next onion, we put the stalk through the gap in the strings, we bring it around one of the strings, doesn't matter which, and then push it back through the gap. We then push the onion down, and the weight of the onion holds its own stalk in place, and that allows us to gradually build up a string. So we just work our way up the string, rotating the string around so that we make sure that we are putting them on evenly up the string, as you can see, so that it basically sort of balances it out properly. And it's important not to put too many on, so I would get to sort of, it depends what size the onions are, but if you get to around sort of 20 medium-sized onions, something like that, then you'll be amazed how heavy it is when you lift it off. Okay, I think that's probably enough for this string. I don't want it to get any heavier than that, but you can see that they're all pretty snug, holding on tight. And so these need to be stored indoors. They need to be in a dry room. Again, they don't want to be in bright sunlight. When you need an onion, you just take the ones from the top. You just basically hold the bunch, yank, and it'll basically tear off the stalk, and then off you go. So, trick is now to find somewhere to hang them. Okay, last but not least are root vegetables, such as carrots and beetroots and things like that. So these are, again, really simple. If done correctly with a little trick I'm going to show you a little bit later, they can store for months and months and stay really fresh, and you can use them pretty much throughout the winter. So first things first, we need to get them out of the ground. Okay, so that's me pulled all the crop out of the ground. What we want to do is we want to identify all the very best carrots that we have, because those are the ones that are going to store for a long term, and those are the ones we're looking for. So you're looking for all the carrots that really are as perfect as possible. There's no point in trying to store ones that have split or have insect damage or anything like that, because they just won't keep and they'll end up rotting the whole batch. So if they're really gnarly, throw them away. Also all the little ones, there's probably no point in storing those, so collect them together and use them just now. But what we're looking for are the really good ones, so I'm going to go through and find the best of the bunch. Although we're obviously looking for the ones that aren't damaged, it doesn't matter if they have forks or anything like that. As long as it's intact, that's fine, we're going to keep those. Now that I've identified all the ones that I'm going to store, what I have to do is remove the leaves from them. I don't tear it right at the very top of the carrot, just a little bit above. And I'm going to do that for each of the ones that I want to store. Great. So that's me got identified and cleared up all the ones I want to store. What I need to do is I need to lay them out and let them dry so that the soil on the carrots dries off a bit. I'm not going to wash them, I'm going to store them like this, but I do want that soil just to dry off so that they're not going to rot when I store them. As far as the leaves are concerned, obviously nothing goes to waste. This is an absolute favourite of the chickens. So if you watched our last video about creating a chicken compost feeder, you might be wondering whether it worked or not. Well, here's your answer. Okay, so my carrots and my beetroots have been drying for 3 or 4 hours in the sunshine, just to make sure that all the soil on them is nice and dry and the moisture's come out of the stubs of the leaves and everything. So once they're dry, they're ready for storage. And with root vegetables, you need to store them in the dark, but also if you were just to store these in your fridge or on your shelf for several months, they would very quickly go soft and spongy and just not really very palatable. This trick stops that from happening. So what you need is some sort of a container that you can get the lid off. There we go. And so you need to have a container that's got a lid so you can keep them in the darkness. But the trick to keeping them from going soft is what's happening when they go soft is actually they're dehydrating gradually. And so what you want to do is stop air getting to them. So to do that, you can either use compost, although we have tried that and in the past there have been some sort of flies and things like that that can come with the gradual breakdown of the compost, so that's not ideal. The best thing is to use either sand, wood chips, or, as we use here, sawdust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line the bottom of the container with sawdust and get covered in it as I'm doing it. And so once I've done that, I'm then going to place the carrots one by one, not touching, in the sawdust, creating the sort of first layer of carrots. So once I've created one layer, I'm going to cover them over with more sawdust. And that basically stops the air getting to each of the carrots. once I've covered them a little bit. As long as they're, each of them are even a little bit covered, that's fine. I then put in my next layer. Again, making sure that they're not touching. And I mean, I want to fit them fairly snug because they've got to fit into the box, but I just got to make sure that they're not touching, and that'll stop them from rotting or anything. So again, more sawdust, cover them over. And so basically I'm going to do this all the way up, creating layer upon layer of carrots. So once I put all the carrots into the box, cover them over with sawdust, and then cover the box with a lid, and they will keep for months and months. Whenever I need to use them, we just go into the box, root around a little bit, pull out the carrots that you need, trying not to disturb the other ones. Great way to look after root veg. Same is true with your beetroots. Same deal, once they're dried out for a few hours, put them into their own box. Again, a layer of sawdust on the bottom, surround them in sawdust, and make sure that you keep the lid on and keep things nice and dark. They'll keep for months. So there you have it. 3 easy ways to continue to enjoy your veg right into winter. Another great way to preserve vegetables and some fruits is dehydrating. And if you haven't seen it already, we created a video here on the best ways to dehydrate tomatoes. So go and check that out. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, you found it useful. If you have, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this about sustainability, self-sufficiency, and following us on our UK homestead journey. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.